So enough about banking, right? Guys, I was a little ambitious with my presentation. I've got to get through like 25 slides in 10 minutes, so bear with me. If I speak quickly, I apologize, but I know we're behind time, so I'll do my best. Happy to hear you had a good Uber experience this morning, by the way. Cool, so maybe just so that I can get an idea, how many of you guys have tried Uber? Okay, good. Good. So I'm just going to very, very briefly go through it. Many of you are already pretty familiar with the screen. But as you know, you can request a ride at the tap of a button. You will immediately see the name, the face, the rating, and the license plate of the driver who's going to come and pick you up. And at the end of the ride, you can rate your experience as well as immediately see how much you've paid. And I just want to very quickly focus on the basics here and why I feel that they're so important, especially from a regulatory point of view, which is something we've been discussing a lot today. If you think about it, the opportunity to do something like this has really only come about in the last 5 years or so, since the advent of smartphone technology, GPS technology, and processing power that's allowed us to be able to do something like this. And if you think about it, before Uber came along, if you didn't have access to a vehicle and you needed to go somewhere that was outside the public transportation system, you would need to get in a taxi. And many times, in order to do that, you would need to sort of stand by the road and kind of wave down a car and jump in. And the reason why this process was regulated by governments worldwide was it was a question of safety, right? We needed to ensure that the car that you were getting into, we knew who that person was who was going to give you a ride. You couldn't just get into any random vehicle. So I want to bring your attention to just the basics of what we're trying to do here at Uber. The simple idea that you can still, of course, hail a taxi by the side of the road by waving your hand or by walking out of a hotel or walking out of an airport. But now you can also use your smartphone where at the touch of a button you can immediately see the driver's name, the driver's photo, the driver's number plate. And all of these details are recorded and stored via satellite and data centers so that we always know exactly who's in every car at any given time. And just that basic nature or the basic feature of our product already means that it's very safe because we always know exactly who's in every car at any given time. So if you leave your phone or you lose your wallet, you can always find out exactly who picked you up and who dropped you off. The rating system is also important because it gives a mechanism for feedback which previously didn't exist. Because if a taxi driver picks you up by the side of the road, he doesn't always have an incentive to necessarily give you the best level of service because he's probably never going to see you again. You're never going to remember who he is, and you'll probably never meet again, right? Whereas here, this gives you a fundamental feedback loop where you can provide both positive and negative feedback as well as a rating so that our driver partners can improve their level of service. Cool. So very quick background on our growth. Started very small. The first ride was in San Francisco in 2010. This is what it looked like. A few cars hovering around with somebody requesting a ride. This is what it looks like at scale. So this is Paris. It is huge. We now provide a number of different products, the UberX, which you're familiar with here in Lithuania, which is our economy product. We also have products like Black, which provide a higher level of service in a luxury vehicle, XL and SUV, which have bigger cars that can fit more people, and we also partner with licensed livery taxi drivers. We're now in 400 cities and 69 countries. It might actually be 70 countries. These numbers kind of change week by week, so you have to forgive me if they're not always accurate, but this is roughly where we are right now, and that's happened in just a matter of 5.5 to 6 years. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what the sharing economy can do for cities and what our vision for urban mobility is overall, right? Because it's not just about being able to provide a safe, efficient, and reliable ride to anybody. It's also about the greater impact that we can have on cities and on urban mobility. So, Vilnius, as far as I understand, gets its fair share of traffic jams. Of course, it's nothing as horrendous as cities like Istanbul, Moscow, and Beijing. But I think many of us are familiar with the idea of the frustration of sitting in a car for hours, in many cases, just waiting to get from one place to another. I think we're also pretty familiar with this idea, right? And I think this is something that many of us have grown up with and very rarely questioned, the idea of a parking lot. For many people, a car will be the second most expensive thing they ever buy after their house. And on average, it sits around doing nothing 23 hours out of every 24. Average occupancy is somewhere between 1.1 and 1.5, depending on where you are. And after we spend all this money on this metal machine, most of our effort is then spent on maintaining it, servicing it, and finding a place to store it 23 hours out of 24. So as a result, what we've seen is cities expend a tremendous amount of money, very expensive public real estate, often in the center of town, just to accommodate these giant metal machines, right? So the question is it possible for us to have fewer cars on the road? Is it possible for us to make car ownership a less attractive proposition or less of a necessity in many of the cities that we currently have? So if we just crunch some basic numbers, utilize a very basic idea, right? We've spent all this money on these cars. They're already out there. The investment's already made. What if we find a way to better utilize the cars that we already have, right? So if you look at the numbers, you've got 1.5 passengers on average, let's say, in a personal vehicle that does 2.5 trips a day. That works out to about 3.8 total person trips per day. If you have just a basic Uber X, and it does 10 trips a day instead, that's 15 person trips per day, which is already a 4x difference in terms of efficiency. Because remember, the reason we have cars is we need to get from one place to another. If we find better and more efficient ways of getting from one place to another than just owning a vehicle, that decreases the need to invest in a car. If we add something else to the mix, a product that we've launched in San Francisco and a number of other cities across the planet called Uber Pool to the mix, then we have a different proposition. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar or you've heard about Uber Pool, but the idea goes like this. If I'm going to pick up this gentleman here and take him to point B, on my way, another gentleman might want a ride to a similar destination. I can pick up the second person, drop off the first person, pick up a third person, drop off the second person, pick up a fourth person, and so it goes, right? In this way, we can increase the efficiency yet again of the existing vehicles that we already have on the road. So those numbers become a little more like this, right? If we can carry 3 passengers on average that do 10 trips per day, then that's 30 person trips per day, which is an 8x improvement in terms of efficiency. Very basic concept, very, very basic concept. We bought all these cars, we spent all this money on them, finding a place to keep them, finding a way to maintain them, making sure they're in good condition, they look shiny and clean. Why not get more efficiency, get more use, get more value out of them? So fewer cars means less congestion, less of that first photo I showed. It means fewer emissions. It means less time wasted sitting in traffic. And it means more economic opportunities for people who either don't earn enough income or don't have an income. But I'd like to pivot back to the original idea behind the product, right? This is all a very utopian thing, but it can't happen unless you create something that people actually want to use. You can't force people to give up their cars. What you need to do is disincentivize them to buy them in the first place by giving them a better alternative. And I can share a statistic on this. What we've seen already with millennials in the US is 10% of millennials surveyed by a study that we did in 2015 said that they had either decided not to buy a car or decided to sell the car that they have. So this is already beginning to pick up steam. There was a New Yorker article, I think, last year, which talked about the fact that 16-year-olds in the US these days, instead of asking their parents to help them buy a car, are now asking their parents to help them get an Uber account. And all of this has happened because we've created a product that people have really enjoyed using, right? So for example, we have a quote here from one of our riders in Portland, Oregon in the US. Brittany works events late night. She felt safer knowing she didn't have to wait outside and hoped she could flag down a ride. So for her, it was the basic idea of being able to pull out the smartphone in her pocket, tap a button, and immediately see all of those details about the person picking her up, and she could get from point A to point B more efficiently and more safely. It's also a question of median wait time, right? Because time is a precious thing, and everybody wants to get from one place to another as quickly as possible so they can spend less time in transit and more time doing the things they like or the things they have to do. So what we aim for is a median wait time of, on average, 5 minutes in every city. So the idea is simple. Whether you're in Vilnius or Chicago or Doha or Shanghai, you should be able to pull out your phone, hit that button, and get a car within 5 minutes anywhere in that city, 24 hours a day. That's the objective. We know we don't always achieve that. We're sorry if anybody's been stranded before. We're trying. That's the objective that we're going for. So just a few slides on what we're doing in the Baltics. Now, my job for Uber, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I'm a launcher. My job is to launch the business in different places. So I'm going to talk about these things from the perspective of launch and how we went about launching in these places. So before we launched in Tallinn, Estonia, which was the first Baltic market that we launched in, one of the things we realized was that people wanted to use Uber in Tallinn. So that map that you see, it's a map of Tallinn, and the blue dots are all examples of people who opened the Uber app before we actually launched. Right? So we weren't available. There's people opening the app looking for a ride. When we overlaid Tallinn's existing public transport network, we noticed something else that was quite interesting. People want to ride, especially in areas that were underserved by public transportation. Now, Tallinn has a great public transportation system. I don't know if you guys are aware, but if you're a resident of Tallinn, you can actually travel for free on its public transit. But no public transportation system is perfect, and there are always areas that are underserved. So we noticed that Uber might actually be an excellent complement to Tallinn's existing public transport system. So that was a huge element of our decision to launch in that market, and a huge component of our conversations with regulators and with policymakers at municipal level in Tallinn and also at federal level in Estonia. Another good example is also the work we did with the tax authorities in Estonia. The tax authorities said to us, okay, you're going to have these guys who are earning extra income by driving around on the Uber platform. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to comply with their tax obligations. So we started working on a platform in Estonia for Uber driver partners in Estonia where they could automatically have the data from their trips migrated into their tax return, something that we're still working on. Just a quick slide on Lithuania. I didn't want to go through it too much because, well, you guys have probably seen some of this in the press, I guess. When we came to Lithuania, we really wanted to reach out to as many people as possible. So we met with the mayor of Lithuania, mayor of Vilnius, where we signed a memorandum of understanding. We met the prime minister of Lithuania as well, and quite a few members of parliament from across the political spectrum. I guess the reason why I wanted to show these slides is because I think that the sharing economy it's a very new concept. These words didn't exist 5 years ago. Ride sharing as a word didn't exist 5 years ago. Uber 5 years ago was still exclusively doing limousine, sort of Lincoln town cars transportation in and around San Francisco, right? And all of this has happened very, very quickly. And it means that in order for this to work well at a global level, we believe that regulation is really important. Regulation needs to catch up. It's also very important for us to get regulators, policymakers, different stakeholders across the board in society as involved as possible, which is why we focus so much on reaching out to as many people as possible, even prior to launching in places like Tallinn and Vilnius. So finally, the last slide. I hope I haven't gone too over time, but this is our vision, right? So transportation as reliable as running water, everywhere for everyone. And I just want to spend like 30 seconds talking about it because corporate visions are usually, well, wishy-washy, fluffy things. But for us, this is a very serious idea, right? The idea is that no matter where you are, especially if you're in a city or an urban center, you should be able to request a ride, a safe, efficient, affordable, reliable ride, and get that ride within 5 minutes, right? So just as everybody now takes the water coming from their tap for granted when they take a shower in the morning, we want transportation to be as ubiquitous and as reliable as that running water. So you don't have to think about how you're going to get to the next place. You just know that it's going to be possible and it's going to be easy. And if you think about it, it really is a transformative idea, right? Because we live our lives through a bunch of choices that we make every single day, right? We decide. We say, okay, I'm going to go to work today. I'm going to go to this job interview. I'm going to go to this cafe for lunch. I'm going to go to this bar late night to have a drink with my friends. I want to go to this concert. And all of that is nice and easy if you live in the city center of a small city, for example. But it gets increasingly more difficult when you live somewhere a little bit further away or in a city that doesn't have good public transportation. And all of that affects your life. It means all of a sudden you can't do stuff, all of a sudden in Jakarta, if you know you're going to have to sit in traffic for 2.5 hours, you're not going to go to that job interview. That job interview that might have gotten you a new job, might have improved your life. You're not going to go to that concert or that gallery that you wanted to go to. So the idea that you could have reliable transportation, as reliable as running water, anytime you want, is transformative, transforms people's lives. And we really believe that. That's it from me. Thank you.